what's striking about this case is just this story was just how specific it was, how specific the information was. The fact that there were meetings, during the night before the attack about the perceived threat, the warnings, the intelligence, and it just seems to have been dismissed is quite striking.
Now, Israel has always been suspicious of the UN. It's felt it was too sympathetic or willing to overlook Hamas. We've had one big row already. How do you rate or gauge this row?
There's always a lot of rhetoric in these things, and as is the way with the UN, its officials, like the Secretary General, are always limited in what they can do by what the great powers, the permanent members of the Security Council, let him do. So if you like, on both sides, there's a lot of talk and not too much action. Israel is starting to withhold visas from UN officials coming to the Palestinian territories through Israel, the West Bank, for example, in retaliation. But it knows that the UN provides, a large proportion of the aid for Gaza, the schools and the hospitals. It wants the UN to change the way it does that, but it doesn't have any serious alternative at the moment. So a lot of rhetoric always, but never a huge amount that either side can do about each other.
But the EU is backing the Secretary General.
It's a complicated issue because most EU states, perhaps most states, want Israel to change the way it operates with regards to the Palestinian issue. But all of them, support the existence of Israel in the face of, Hamas's resistance to that concept. So they're kind of caught in the middle, and yes, the EU, a transnational organization like the UN, often tends to sympathize with those it sees as caught in a bind like this.
There's a story in the Times today, Richard, that Israeli spies and military commanders knew that there was a threat, I think specifically to the Nova Music Festival the night before it happened, but for some reason they didn't pass on warnings to the organisers. And we all know about the Nova Music Festival now. 360 people died, 40 taken hostage. What do we know about what went on and what the effect of this story, this information will be in Israel?
We knew that obviously what happened on October 7th, it represented a huge intelligence failure for the Israeli side, which is normally has such extraordinary intelligence capabilities. We know all that Mossad is capable, or that Shin Bet, its internal security agencies, are capable of in terms of their technical prowess and their network of informants. I think what's striking about this case is just how this story was, just how specific it was, how specific the information was. The fact that there were meetings, during the night before the attack about the perceived threat, the warnings, the intelligence, and it just seems to have been dismissed is quite striking. Also, what's interesting about this is, the Supernova Festival was, being held a couple of miles from the border fence, so in an area that is under sort of special supervision, if you like, in Israel, and had to get all these special permits to take place from the army. And yet, even when these threats became clear and were being discussed, no one thought to tell the security people at the Supernova Festival or allow them to make their own decision about whether to call it off.
Yeah. And I'm just interested really in terms of, because it's in the Times, but how will a story like that be covered in Israel? And how angry is it likely to get relatives of people who died there?
There's a huge amount of anger, and I think, some of it is being subsumed into the broader conflict. The government's approach to the conflict, it seems to be widely supported, and for sure there will be people who say, well, this is a distraction, where we've got to fight Hamas. They actually carried out this attack, they have to be punished. We'll come to all that later. That's certainly what the government says, we'll come to all that later. But I think you saw the night before, when some of the families of the hostages met Netanyahu, there was a huge amount of anger there expressed for a whole host of reasons at Netanyahu about the way he's conducted himself and the way this has all unfolded, from that intelligence failure at the beginning all the way through to the calling off of the ceasefire before all of the hostages were released. So there are parts of the Israeli public who are very angry about this. It's the Israeli public is very divided about a lot of things, and there are definitely a lot of people who are saying, this is a distraction. We don't need to focus on our own failings. We need to focus on getting Hamas. But the relatives of those who were killed are going to be a very powerful spokespeople for some of that anger in the coming months.